especially in light of what we heard from the crew yesterday. I think as a geologist by training, I love looking at the pictures of the lunar surface, but I think certainly emotionally a lot of us have connected with the images of Earth, with the images from during the eclipse, with the images from the vehicle cameras taking pictures of the moon during the eclipse period. And while they are inspirational and I think allow all of us to really feel a little bit of what they were feeling, there's also a lot of science hidden inside of those images. And I can tell you that right now as we speak, there is a science evaluation room full of several dozen scientists who are already getting going on those images. Just as one example, there was a healthy scientific debate this morning about some of those images taken during the eclipse period and what we can see of the solar corona and what we can see of zodiacal light. So the conversations and the science lessons learned are just beginning.
Hi, TG Mascara with the Epoch Times. Thanks so much for taking the time. For Jared, as we saw with Artemis 2 going around the moon and having that very characteristic blackout of when they go around the moon, how much longer are missions to the moon going to have that as we develop a moon base? And where do, say, communication satellites in lunar orbit?
People have asked quite a bit about, was elevated blood pressure when we were without comms with Orion on the far side of the moon. I mean, we have comm issues in LEO relatively, routinely. Certainly our operators train for it, our astronauts do as well. But in terms of the bigger picture, can we do better? For sure, right? I mean, we've talked about, prioritizing observation and comm relay satellites for lunar operations so we can bring the world along with us as we build out a moon base. And I think I was in a meeting not that long ago where we described it as if not the platinum age for commercial communication capabilities, certainly the golden age. We're very close. So we have a number of providers that are all investing heavily in these kind of capabilities that we can take advantage of in LEO, cislunar space, and I have no doubt in lunar orbit in the years ahead.
Hi, Kay for Interstellar Gateway. Thanks for doing these. This is really cool. Jared, question for you. Can you speak on the responsibility of what being the administrator during such a pivotal moment means? And secondly, I'm speaking on behalf of musicians around the world and bands. I have a band called Chasing Satellites, and will there be potentially an opportunity to submit music for a future Artemis mission for the wake-up calls? That was really cool to be a part of and to watch as a musician.
Certainly. So I think I've described before that I thought that certainly felt a lot more pressure, being on the outside and responsible for a human spaceflight mission than being in the vehicle itself, especially a mission such as Artemis 2, which kicks off so many other exciting ones to follow as, we return to the moon and build that enduring presence to learn so that we can undertake even grander missions, as Dr. Glaze referenced, beyond the moon in the future. So I think it is a great responsibility, but you derive confidence from all the expertise that exists within NASA, the workforce, our commercial, our international partners that come together for a moment like this, all the testing that goes into it, and the fact that we have this playbook before and we're running it. Now, in terms of contributions for music and future wake-up music for subsequent missions, I hope we're running so many missions to and from the moon in the future that we're going to have to cast a very wide net for creative content. So.
For Administrator Isaacman, Tom Costello with NBC News. I'm just wondering, how are you feeling now? I realize we don't have the crew home yet, but you've had a very successful trip around the far side. How are you feeling about this setting the stage, testing out the vehicle for a lunar landing as soon as 2028?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd say for this mission, we're certainly off to a good start. I mean, clean launch, and the vehicle has been doing well. I've made commentary early on that I like that we're talking about, water access valves and cabin temperature and even plumbing issues, for that matter, for all the things that we could have been potentially talking about prior to the mission underway. But I'll breathe easier when we get through reentry and everybody's undershoots and in the water. In terms of getting ready for the subsequent missions, it's kind of why I picked some of the words that I did at the beginning of this press event, is that a lot of people's rightful attention right now is on the crew of Artemis II, especially here at JSC and Mission Control, especially the recovery forces that are now making their way out to bring this crew back to their family. And for everybody else, we've got the other things to get done, including thinking about Artemis 3. It's why I was very happy that the crawler is making its way out to 39B right now. We've got a timeline to get it back in the VAB, ideally in a week. That would cut down on the turnaround, I think, by 3 months compared to Artemis 2. So we can undertake, again, world-changing missions like Artemis 2 right now and get ready for the next ones at the same time.
Hi, Josh Dinner, space.com. Has this mission revealed anything about life aboard Orion, crew workload, flights in deep space, or maybe something unexpected that will shape how NASA and Artemis crews approach preparing for future missions?
You want to take that, flight ops?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. We've learned a tremendous amount as part of a lot of the flight test subjective activities we've been doing. I think we have a couple of problems that we still need to work out, but Orion has shown itself to be a very capable capsule for beyond Earth orbit space travel. And I think the things like, as the administrator talked about, the things that we're going to have to improve upon for Artemis 3 are relatively small and incremental in nature, as opposed to wholesale redesigns of spacecraft subsystems. So overall, I'm extremely pleased with the performance of the spacecraft and how it's served as a campsite for our 4 crew members.
We'll go from Marcia to Eric and then do a couple on the phone bridge.
I'm Marcia Dunn, Associated Press for Dr. Young. It's hard for me to know how quickly these pictures are coming down. How many would you estimate that have come down so far of the moon? And these luminous flashes on the surface, was that an actual meteor shower, do you think, or is it just your usual business of falling debris?
So the team, the FOD team, is working really hard to bring down the images as fast as they can. Of course, we also have other vehicle data that needs to come down as well. But the team is working really hard to try to get those images down and of course, get them out to you guys as well. As of the time I left Console, roughly an hour ago, there was just over 50 gigabytes of data from yesterday that had come down. Of course, every image does not exactly have the moon in it, but it is taken from within the lunar observation period. So we're working really hard to get those down, as well as the audio files that the crew were taking. That's a really rich scientific data set because it captures the nuance of what the crew were seeing. We heard a few of those per hour in those science situational reports you were hearing yesterday, but there are multiple hours of recordings of meaty science observations, about 2/3 of which we've been able to get down so far, and our team has already been looking at that, those couple hours of transcripts and audio files. As for the impact flashes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we think they saw at least 4 and possibly up to 6 impact flashes. Again, I talked to them about that just this morning in the crew conference with them. I think, it's very early to tell, right? This happened less than 24 hours ago. Our teams are looking at it now, and we have a lot to learn about it. LRO has returned a lot of information about the lunar environment.
Eric Berger, Ars Technica. There's a question maybe for Jared. So why haven't we been back to the moon in 53 minutes? I'm just kidding. So you brought up the Artemis 3 mission design. Can you bring up or talk about the 2 or 3 hardest problems that you're tackling? You talked about the mission design meeting today, but the 2 or 3 hardest problems you're tackling right now to make sure that launches next year.
Yeah, so I don't want to get too far out in front of a mission that's underway right now. I would just say that there are a lot of things based on the information we have available today, from feedback from our vendors, that we know are achievable. And I think one of the questions probably will just be what the initial orbit will be for Artemis 3. Is it going to be LEO or HEO? And I think that we're all going to have some sense of which one, and there's pros and cons for each of them for sure. We're all going to be able to have some sense about which path we'll likely go down based on launch cadence of our two HLS providers, both of which have launches coming up, I would say, in the next month or less right now. So a big key to our strategy, not just to return to the moon, but to stay and to build a base, is going to be rapid reusability of heavy lift launch vehicles. So the more they get experience doing that, the more options that are available for us for Artemis 3. But I'd say right now, we certainly have a good plan for that mission. Will help us buy down a lot of risk in advance of a landing for Artemis 4 in 28.
Jeff Faust with Space News.
Hi, Jeff Faust with Space News. Question for Dr. Young. Now that you are going to get all of these images and verbal descriptions and annotations, what's the plan for the science team in the days and weeks ahead to go through all of that data and see how they address the 10 science objectives that you laid out for this mission? Thank you.
Oh my goodness, what a good question. We have a lot of data to get through. Like I said, it has already started. We had teams working overnight, after the crew went to sleep, as soon as we started getting data down. I will reiterate that we will be getting all mission data relevant to lunar science archived and made publicly available within 6 months post-splashdown. So these are all of the images of the moon, these audio files, and even the annotations. But in the meantime, over those next 6 months, we're also going to be preparing 2 reports that we also owe to be publicly released within 6 months post-mission. One is a science operations report that describes, how our team was structured to integrate with flight operations to accomplish our objectives. But relevant to your question, the second one is a post-mission preliminary lunar science report. And so we are going to be going objective by objective with those 10 lunar science objectives you referenced, looking across this entire, really rich, robust, but very large data set, and really trying to understand what data we got relevant to each objective, but set up the community for success so that they can access those data and help us answer these fundamental driving science questions. The lunar science team for this mission, it was our charter to develop the objectives and to maximize the science value out of this mission. We'll be doing an initial assessment over 6 months, and then we're really eager to see what the community is able to do with these data.
We'll move to Ken Chang with the New York Times.
Thank you. So I have some questions about the optical communications. How was the performance like? How many gigabytes was sent? What was the data rate? How does that compare with what was expected? And how does it compare with the usual way of sending data back? And it seems like it's been almost operational already and not just a test. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the question was relative to some of the data rates for the optical communication system. I'll just give you a stat from overnight that we heard from Consul. We got 20 gigabytes down in a little more than 45 minutes. That's orders of magnitude more than we get via our S-band telemetry system. So optical comm has been working really well, and hopefully we can take what we learned on Artemis 2 and expand its operational capability and its implementation for future missions.
And now we will move to Lauren Grush with Bloomberg.
Out to me yesterday was just the vivid descriptions that the crew used for what they were seeing and how they remained in kind of constant contact and talkative throughout the flyby. I'm wondering if it's possible to say how that might have compared to the Apollo crew observations and how that robustness impacted the science and the data that was collected.
Absolutely. I mean, probably a lot of people watching have spent a lot of time looking back at Apollo and maybe watching Apollo in real time online and reliving what the Apollo crews, not just on the surface, but in orbit, experienced. You have, I'm sure, heard the Apollo descriptions of the lunar surface from orbit, and they were also really impactful. They trained heavily in geology and orbital observations, just like the Artemis II crew did. I will say, listening to the level of scientific discourse that the crew was having yesterday was incredibly inspiring. I mean, a testament to how much they prepared before this mission. You know, I heard a couple times Christina and Victor especially saying, when we took the time to actually talk to each other about a specific target that we were both seeing, we elevated each other. We elevated what we were able to pull out of that target. You know, more brains on a scientific target are better than one, and we heard from them directly multiple times that they were helping each other to advance their scientific understanding of what they were looking at. We actually also heard them say, hey, we have a hypothesis. Can you guys provide guidance on that hypothesis, like right now in the middle of our flyby? So the science team was saying, you know, was cross-checking what they were seeing, was reading up geologic ages of major lunar impact features, and it was informing the observations they were making during the flyby. I mean, this is absolutely everything we hoped for by integrating science into flight operations, you know, because, again, science enables exploration and exploration enables science. And the fact that, you know, they're giving observations and, you know, I was able to immediately follow up on those observations with, you know, just the quick questions that can enhance science return, it meant that they were evaluating and buying down multiple working hypotheses in real time during their flyby. And just imagining the future when we have crew on the surface for short duration missions and ultimately the moon base, the amount of science we are able to gain when, you know, science is woven into this operational fabric is incredibly impactful. And we saw that, you know, for 7 straight hours yesterday.
Now we'll move to Micah Maidenberg with the Wall Street Journal.
Hey, good afternoon. For Rick, what is the approximate time on Friday when the crew module separates from the service module, if you have that on hand? You know, the administrator mentioned splashdown is expected for around 8:07 Eastern. And then any color on kind of reentry prep work ahead for the crew and mission control between now and Friday. Thanks.
Sure. I'll start with some of the times. The crew module and service module separation is going to occur about 20 minutes before entry interface. So that separation will be at 7:33 p.m. Eastern Time. We expect entry interface about 7:53 p.m. Eastern Time with a splashdown around 8:06 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday. As for the preparations that the ground and the astronauts are doing today to prepare for entry, or today and future days, a lot of it is all of the science equipment and cameras and tablets and reference material that got unstowed in support of the flyby. Well, we have to put that all away. We have to pack up our suitcases and get ready to come home. And that takes time, and so we are laying out a plan to make sure that the crew gets everything packed away in time to get their suits on and get in their seats to perform that final trajectory correction maneuver on splashdown day and come home.
We'll move back in the room to Joey and then on to Will.
Thanks. Joey Roulette with Reuters. I just had another quick toilet question. Do you have any idea as to why the venting is not happening as fast as you hope it is, and what other hardware on the spacecraft might that implicate, or what other problems might that cause?
Yeah, so the engineering team is going to go through a full fault tree to identify all of the potential causes of the blockage. Initially, you may have recalled that we thought it might be icing up at the nozzle at the outer mold line of the spacecraft. We have pretty high confidence that it's not an icing condition. We've put the spacecraft in a sun-focused attitude to bake off any ice. We've activated heaters along the lines internal to the spacecraft, and we still see a blockage. And so the latest theory is related to some of the chemistry that goes into ensuring that the wastewater doesn't develop any biofilms. And there may be something going on with a chemical reaction where there's some debris that's generated as part of that reaction, and it's getting clogged in a filter. But again, we don't have root cause, and once we get the spacecraft back into the processing facility in Florida, we'll be able to get access to all the components and do a real detailed fault tree to identify the root cause.
Hi, Will Robinson-Smith with Spaceflight Now. Thank you all for taking the time. Going back to Dr. Young's point about the intersection of science and exploration, to both Dr. Young and to Dr. Glaze, given the number of believed to be impact flashes that the crew observed during just a relatively brief amount of time, I wonder how these observations and the ones made previously by LRO will factor into creating the conditions for a moon base that can allow the astronauts to stay safe, given the probability that they may experience a micrometeoroid impact at that site. Thank you.
Want to say anything? Well, I do think that the data that we're collecting with these observations, and as you noted, the LRO data that we're continuously collecting, we have been for quite a while, all of that is being fed into our plans and making sure that we understand what all of the variety of risks are. There's many that we're looking at, and of course micrometeorites being one, as we start to establish infrastructure on the surface and understanding those rates. These kind of data really help inform us as far as what we can anticipate. And of course, the different parts of the moon, down at the South Pole, maybe a little slightly different rates than we would see higher up at higher latitudes. So we need to compile all of those data and understand where, what those impacts might be.
Hi, I'm Nick Notori with ABC 13. A question about the scientific stuff that you found yesterday. I know the question was asked about what was inspirational. I talked to Joel Kearns yesterday, and he had told me, I'm just looking at his quote, as a scientist, I can tell you what's most inspirational is when you're pouring through something you're working on and you realize you're seeing something that nobody else has ever seen before. I know you talked about the impact flashes, but is there anything else that no one else has seen before that you guys have already saw? And then also explain to us on Earth that maybe this is high level over our heads, how what was photographed or taken yesterday could maybe give us some answers on our planet of Earth.
Thank you. Yeah, lovely questions. I might just give a specific example of something I heard from the crew yesterday. My background's in geology and specifically impact cratering, so every time they describe those beautiful basins, I get really excited. They did describe Ohm crater a couple of different times, and they noticed a variety of different color and albedo hues associated not just with Ohm, but with the rays that extend out from the crater. This could indicate, impact events are really compelling for a lot of reasons. Obviously, I'm quite biased, having written my PhD on them. But they can excavate material from great depths below the surface, which means they're kind of like a geologist's cheat code, right? Where you can't get all the way down there by yourself, but when an impact has brought up that material for you, it can actually perform that excavation, and we just need to send the crew to the right spots on the surface, and they can actually look at depths far below the surface.
And I bring that up here to say that what the crew observed around Ohm yesterday was they actually noticed color and albedo hues coming out in those rays, and they noticed that they were distinct and different and evolved along the ray systems, which could potentially lead us to believe that that crater excavated from distinct depths below the surface of the moon. So it's those kinds of nuanced observations that can ultimately inform future landed missions, future crewed missions, to understand where can we go to maximize the scientific value. These ultimately get at chronology of the solar system, at how the inner solar system has evolved over time, which connects to, the moon being the witness plate for our planet and for the inner solar system. You heard Lori and I the other day get very excited about talking about, pesky plate tectonics and oceans and vegetation that gets in the way of us looking at the early part of our planet's past, and the fact that that part of the record of our Earth-Moon system is still available on Earth.
Well, where it's available is the highlands, the far side highlands, and the South Pole. Specifically, the South Pole has the South Pole Ayın Basin, which is my personal favorite lunar and planetary science objective.
It's the oldest basin in the solar system. If we can get the right age constraints on that basin, it can help us anchor the chronology for the entire solar system. And so crew observing things like they did with OHM, where they can say, with my eyes, I can see this distinction, which can ultimately tell us that future observations of high priority landing sites could tell us something similar. This is how we start to really bite away at these really, really fundamental science questions that impact not just our understanding of the moon, but how our own planet has evolved over time.
Mark Kirkman with NSF. This is for Rick. While we have you here, I'd like to drill down a little bit on entry day a little more. Sounds like weather in the primary recovery zone is looking favorable, but can you walk through, as we approach EI and past EI, what redes capability you have, what kind of cross range and downrange capability you have, when are you committed to that landing zone? And also, with this thermally benign entry you're going to fly, do you still expect to exceed Apollo 10's speed record? I know you don't care about that stuff, but we do.
That's all right. You can still keep asking the questions, and we'll go follow up, and we'll find the answers. I do not have the answer offhand about the Apollo 10 speed record, so we'll have to get that back to you tomorrow. And tomorrow, I'm actually going to provide a lot of detail about the sequence of events for